Imagine for a second that you're God, pristine, uncorrupted, perfect, yet remarkably naive. You are so abstract that you don't realize that anything else but yourself exists, until one day you notice a stain upon yourself, an infinitesimal flaw. To your shock and dismay, within this flaw lay some incredible contradictions: heroes, villains, love, hatred. Stories begin to leak into your very being, and you hate it. So you create a barrier to protect yourself from further direct contact. And then you make a probe with the function of investigation of this flaw, so that you'll be safe from further corruption. The probe's name is Dax Novu. Dax Novu is sent into the flaw and relays back to the Overvoid what the details of the flaw truly are. You are completely enamored and disgusted by the notion of stories. With no precedent for the concept story, Monitor has zero defenses. Story itself has corrupted the Overvoid, and also the probe that the Overvoid sent inward to investigate story. Due to his own corruption, the probe splits into two, and the flaw is sealed over like a band-aid, made safe with divine metals. The Silent Sentinel haunts Monitor. The Silent Sentinel is named the Cosmic Armor, otherwise known as the Thought Robot. It continues to infect the Overvoid like a contagion that keeps spreading. The Overvoid is a reference to M-Theory's unified field. It's the apex of all things. It contains all things that are things. Whatever the final realm that contains all other realms is, that is the Overvoid. Here, the author confirms to us that the Overvoid has a context of being non-fictional. It is similar to writing a story about as if the Earth were to wake up one day and suddenly be sentient, and it peers down into the fictional comics that we create. In this case, the unified field is exterior to the Earth, the universe, our multiverse, and everything else we know as existence. This field is the true form of God, but try not to confuse that with any religious deism. In this physics theory, we ask where these deities came from, such as Yahweh, Allah, or even the flying spaghetti monster. This is a physics notion that explains where they came from and why even the concept of God exists. The answer is the unified field allowed it and birthed it into being. Here, the author explains that these exterior realms contain not just all fictional realms, but also our real world too. Ask yourselves, is it not logical to say that the universe contains all fictions that we write? Is it not logical to say that the multiverse also contains every fiction that we write on Earth? Because the Earth is contained by this singular universe, is it not? So too, we scale up to the final realm that there can be, the unified field, otherwise known as the Overvoid, which contains everything else. So the Overvoid contains every possible thing that there is, all fictions included. It's important to note that no other future authors of DC Comics really ever adhered to this context. The Overvoid was completely changed after 2008 and 2014's The Multiversity. The issue of existing outside of the artwork was removed, and the Overvoid became a zone within the artwork. By now, you should have the proper context for at least two of the three big applications that we discovered in Superman Beyond, the first being the Overvoid, and the second being the probe that the Overvoid created to investigate the flaw. But what is the flaw? We know from this scan that the flaw contains all stories, but does that only mean DC Comics? Well, I'm afraid not. It's all-inclusive. All things equate to all things, and it's just that simple. I went to ask the DC Comics guidebook author what this meant and what this included inside of that flaw. He told me that in his opinion, everything means everything, which is mirrored by the author who wrote the story of Superman Beyond elsewhere in another interview. Everything that ever was is inside of that jar. If we skip over to the Multiversity, which was released in 2014, we get a bit more detail on all of this and how it all went down. The Overvoid noticed the flaw and defines itself as everything that the flaw is not. This is a very important piece of data to absorb. Everything that the Overvoid is not is this flaw, and this flaw is what infected the Overvoid originally. Moving back to Superman Beyond's telling of this exact same event, we find out that the Cosmic Armor is actually what infected the Overvoid, so we have a parallel here. The flaw infected the Overvoid, the armor infected the Overvoid, but how can that be? Aren't these things different? Well, not really. They are paradoxically the same thing, and I'm going to show you exactly how. So let's move on to the slipcover of Final Crisis. That means when you had bought the original print, the larger complete edition of this comic series, it came wrapped in a sleeve of paper. And on this sleeve of paper, some text is given to us about the ongoing events in the comic we're about to read. On that slipcover, we find out that the fight between Mandrake and the cosmic armor was actually all of existence versus non-existence. It was all the is versus all the isn't. Now that is a very important fact to retain in your memory, so please don't forget that for the rest of this video. Now here, the author tells us in another interview that the cosmic armor is all the is, and that Mandrake is all the isn't. So we have another parallel of information that confirms what the other piece of data said. So how can the tube behind the armor is a mirror of the armor. They are the same object. The flaw infected the Overvoid, but later we find out it was the armor that infected the Overvoid. And again, the context for the flaw was everything. Not just every fiction, but our real world and the worlds beyond it. This is where the notion of the title of the comic Superman Beyond comes into play and what it really means. In this exterior thing to the artwork, exterior the fiction, exterior our real world and all the realms beyond, that is what the comic Superman Beyond was about. The armor predates Nil, and after monitors were made by the Overvoid, their entire civilization is built around the cosmic armor. They regard it also as a mystery that they cannot truly solve. They speculate for eons and never got their answer until the events of Superman Beyond came to a halt. So now we have a generalized context for what the armor is. It is the flaw of existence personified to the Overvoid as the most safe thing possible, a suit of literal cosmic armor named the Cosmic Armor Superman. So what are its powers and what can it do? Well, it has no limits whatsoever. And it stands conceptually larger than the entire summation of existence itself. Again, this isn't just DC Comics in that tube, it's everything that is a thing. Every fictional character and real-world plot point is in that tube structure, because that tube was personified into a suit of armor to make the Overvoid feel safe and secure. The suit of armor is story. It is plot. It contains every single concept there ever was, is, and ever will be, the law of identity, the law of being omnipotent, the laws of creation and destruction, concepts of infinite power and energy, the concept of infinite reality warping and magic, the concept of no-selling the enemy, the concept of never losing a fight no matter what. These are all notions contained within the armor that the armor can use at its behest even before there is any danger. That's right, the cosmic armor can pre-adapt to all threats. The moment you create a versus battle against the armor, it is in the armor's power and nature to have already won that fight. Mandrake was able to harm the armor greatly and forever change the landscape of all stories. Due to Mandrake being the corrupted side of the Overvoid, that original probe that Overvoid sent to investigate the flaw had also been corrupted, and it morphed into what we know as Mandrake. The corruption of the Overvoid and anything directly tied to the Overvoid are the only whatevers that can possibly damage story and plot, to the point where it goes blind and cannot proceed. The adaptation power doesn't work on Mandrake, and infinite transcendence was the only route possible that the cosmic armor can take to defeat Mandrake. And that still wasn't enough. Imagine being the summation of all existence and then having been transcended by Mandrake somehow. And then, for you as the armor to transcend that power and gain even more somehow than Mandrake had. And then Mandrake responds by doing the same thing back to you. And then you respond as the armor back to Mandrake, transcending that power. These two entities continue to do this for a null value set of time, meaning that time doesn't apply in this place to begin with, so technically they transcended each other infinitely over and over and over by factors of infinity. What do I mean by this specifically, though? The armor in Mandrake started out more powerful than the sum of all things, of every single concept, every single fictional container there ever was. Then they transcended that power over and over and over, effectively becoming infinitely more powerful than the already infinite sets of infinite multiverses inside of just DC Comics. During this era, DC Comics alone had infinite sets of multiverses, each with infinite sets of universes within. Now combine that with every other fiction you can think of and every other set of multiverses that exists within the flaw. Mandrake and the armor started out more powerful than all of that combined, and were able to reach conceptual levels of infinite transcendence beyond it. That it got to the point where it seemed like their power didn't really matter, and Superman decided to take a different route. Instead of continuing the fight, Superman attacked emotionally with a cosmic truth that Mandrake disliked, and that forced Mandrake to drop his guard, so to speak. Superman shouts, "You are the corrupted side of Monitor. You were the best of them." This truth crippled Mandrake just enough for the cosmic armor to bash Mandrake off the ledge of Nil and directly into the Overvoid, where the idea of Mandrake was lost forever. Afterward, the armor makes note that stories are special and to leave them be. It powers down. Many here on the debate field claim that the armor died, but it didn't die. It powered down permanently so that nobody else can ever take control of all stories and pilot it. The grave that Mandrake referenced was the gravesite of all stories, of plot. The gravesite was the plot of the cosmic armor. The cosmic armor does not lay down inside of it. He powers down next to it and etches a phrase onto the head of the tombstone. To be continued. The cosmic armor made sure that all stories ever will proceed onward without anyone to ever helm them again. The power of story itself permanently damaged by Mandrake, to the point it had no choice but to disable itself and make sure here and forevermore that story will never cease for anyone or anything. Thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Can't wait to hear all your comments. Please bring it on. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks so much.